Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at a brand new mini PC from AEROFARA known as the Tank56. So in the past we've actually taken a look at least one AEROFARA mini PC powered by an Intel Celeron N5105. Relatively cheap on Amazon, great little performer. But recently they released the Tank56 and I knew I had to get my hands on it due to the specs and the odd shape of this thing. I actually really do like the way this thing looks. So yeah, what we have here is a pretty powerful little mini PC powered by a Ryzen 5 5600U. It does have full function USB Type-C up front. It's 3.2, so it will support display out. Inside of the box, you're going to get a 65 watt power supply. We've also got some mounting brackets, an HDMI cable, and some hardware to mount a 2.5 inch drive inside of the unit because it will support a mechanical or an SSD. So far, I've seen this offered in two different storage variants. So you can pick it up with 8 gigs of RAM and 250 gigabytes of storage, or 16 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigabytes of storage. Both of them are going to be using an M.2 SSD. And as you can see, this thing isn't much bigger than an Xbox controller, so we've got a really small form factor PC here. And when it comes to I/O, up front here, we've got a 3.5mm audio jack, full function USB Type-C 3.2, and two USB 3.0 ports. Over here on the right hand side, we've got a micro SD card reader. On the left hand side, not much going on over here, but when we move around back, we've got our power input, two full-size HDMI 2.0 ports, two more USB 3.0 ports, and Gigabit Ethernet. Plus, this does come pre-installed with Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. And real quick, I just wanted to show you the internals. The way they have this set up is actually pretty cool given the case they have. It will support an extra 2.5 inch drive. I would highly recommend using an SSD, but it slides right out with 6 screws, and it's actually using a Kingston M.2 SSD and Kingston RAM here. When it comes to the specs, this is utilizing the Ryzen 5 5600U. This is based on Zen 3 architecture. We've got 6 cores, 12 threads, a base clock of 2.3 GHz, and a boost up to 4.2. Normally, the 5600U runs at 15 watts in laptops to keep that heat down, but since we're working with a little PC here and we're not relying on battery power, as soon as you turn on high performance mode in Windows, this will be running at 30 watts, and we should see some really good performance out of this little chip running it at a higher TDP. For the graphics, we've got a Radeon 7 iGPU at 1800 MHz. The unit I have here did come pre-installed with 16 GB of DDR4 running at 3200 MHz, but I suspect that the 8 GB model will only be running in single channel, so you might want to upgrade that if you want to get out a little cheaper up front. It will help out with that GPU performance. But with this one, we've also got a 500 GB M.2 NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and for the operating system, we have Windows 11 installed on this unit. And here it is. So right now I've just got this plugged into a little 4K portable monitor, single USB Type-C cable going in. It'll enable touch. We can also do 4K 60 and this little monitor will do it. Overall, not a bad little experience, and I've tested the 5600U in the past and the H. This is a great little chip as long as you can get those TDPs up there. And like I mentioned, in high performance mode, this is running at 30 watts, so it can send enough power to the CPU and the GPU side of things to keep the clocks up on both, and in turn, we should see some really great performance out of the 5600U in this PC. So the first thing I wanted to take a look at was some 4K video playback from YouTube, and you might notice that everything's a bit hard to see on the screen, and that's because I don't have any scaling going on with this tiny monitor, and it is at 4K 60 FPS. It actually does support FreeSync. But we'll head over here to YouTube, go to a demo video, and we'll make sure we're at 4K. I've got Stats for Nerds up on screen. And the 5600U can definitely handle 4K video playback quite well. And we are at a true 4K 60 FPS here with no scaling. On the initial load in, we did get a few drop frames. I'm on Wi-Fi 6 right now. Usually I run over Ethernet. But overall, these are frames you'll never see drop to the naked eye. This thing really does a great job with 4K. And this is just streaming from YouTube. I mean, if you got a Plex server set up, you could use that. You could run from an external or internal drive, and you shouldn't have any issues at all. Even at a lower wattage, this will handle 4K 60. Next thing I wanted to take a look at were some benchmarks, and first up we have Geekbench 5 coming in with a single core score of 1407, multi 6055. With 3D Mark Night Raid we got a 14,323, and the final one I ran here was Firestrike with a 3,524. So these really aren't that bad given the form factor and power consumption of this little PC, but now I want to test out some PC games and see how this thing really performs. So the first game we have here is Genshin Impact 1080p medium settings, and it's doing a great job. I did see it dip down to around 58 every once in a while. I think that's kind of shaders caching in the background. But in the last few months, they have been doing some really nice little updates to this game, at least when it comes to performance on Windows. And on these Ryzen chips, you should get some great performance. Moving over to one of my favorite indie games. Now I do like testing this on lower end hardware, and usually I gotta go down to 720p low, but with this we're at 1080p, very high, and we're over 60. This is fully playable here, and it's so much fun. I mean, if you're into racing games, then you'll love the Art of Rally. Definitely give it a try. MK11, I mean, it's so impressive how well this game runs on lower end hardware. We're at 1080p with a medium-low mix. Now on the 5600H at a higher wattage, we can actually run this at full medium settings 1080p, but there were a few that I had to turn down to low. But either way you look at it, this game is fully playable on the 5600U. Here's Forza Horizon 5 at 900p with a low-medium mix, and this will run at 1080p, all low settings. You can get an average of around 65, but I wanted to see what we could do with it, and at 900p low-medium, we can get an average of 71 FPS out of this game. Pretty impressive, but it's another one of those games that's very well optimized. Next on the list, we've got Doom Eternal 720p low settings with dynamic resolution scale turned on. So I was really hoping we could get a constant 60 out of this, and with dynamic resolution scale, I usually set, the frame limit to around 64, so it will scale it down a bit, but even with it set up like this, you can see that we are dipping under 60. I'd say the best setting for this would be turn VSync on, static resolution scale set to about 80%. Of course, we had to test out Cyberpunk 2077. We're at 720p low with FSR set to performance, and this little chip is trying its hardest to keep a steady 60. I also turned VSync on. I was hoping we could lock it there. And it's not doing a bad job, but there is one more setting that we can use. Actually, FSR Ultra Performance. It will run at a constant 60, but I just don't like the way it looks. Here's another one I always like to test, God of War 720p low settings with FSR set to performance. So we can get an average of 41 FPS out of this game, and remember from the settings in this one, we actually do have a frame lock, so you can lock that right at 40 and play it like this all day. And the final game I wanted to test here was Spiderman Remastered, newly released, 720p low FSR performance, and with these little APUs, FSR is pretty magical because without it, we'd be really struggling even to hit 30 FPS, but with it set up like this, we can get an average of 44 FPS out of this game. So in the end, the Tank56 is actually putting out some really decent performance. I'm glad that they have this TDP set up so it's kind of adjusted according to the settings in Windows, but from the BIOS, we could always lock this at 30 watts if you want to. You can go lower. We've also got a fan curve that we can adjust there. But for this video, I was just using the Windows power management settings, and it balanced. It runs at about 12 watts, and in high performance mode, as you saw, we can hit up 30, little over around 33, I think we saw it kind of peak out at every once in a while. When it comes to total system power consumption from the wall using a kilowatt meter, this idles around 10 watts. Average gaming, it pulls around 42, and the maximum that I could get this to pull while maxing out the CPU and GPU was 57 watts. Remember, we've got a 65 watt power supply that comes included, so we're good there. And another thing to keep in mind is I'm in high performance mode. Using balanced mode will lower these significantly, but you're not going to get that kind of gaming performance. Another thing I wanted to take a look at with this thing was average CPU temp. So at idle, we're around 40 degrees Celsius. Average gaming, 82, which does seem on the hot side, but remember, we're working with a small form factor enclosed mini PC. I didn't hit thermal throttle while gaming, but running Cinebench R23 for about 6 minutes did bring me up to thermal throttle, which on this is set at 94 degrees Celsius. But yeah, with the 5600U running at about 30 watts, this thing is a great performer. If you're interested in learning more, or if you want to see anything else running on this, just let me know in the comments below. I kind of like the design. They did swap it up a little bit from the square mini PCs we usually take a look at, so if you're into that kind of aesthetic, then this might be for you. But that's going to wrap it up for this one, and like always, thanks for watching.